Whether or not 2006 was a good year for One Piece depends entirely on your taste. The manga was firmly into the well-regarded Water 7 saga, with the anime right behind at the tail end of March of that year. But if you were to judge a series by only its non-canon material in 2006, it was not a good year. Because 2006 is the year we got One Piece's 7th movie, The Giant Mechanical Soldier of Karakuri Castle. As a follow-up to One Piece's most unique and darkest movie, Karakuri Castle had exactly one job: be anything but that. As much as a cult classic Baron Omatsuri and the Secret Island has become nowadays, it's the least One Piece that One Piece has ever been, and the incredibly dark and mildly disturbing visuals reportedly caused nightmares in the younger audience. When a series has a reputation for lighthearted adventures where darker subjects are, for the most part, hidden beneath the surface, embracing that darkness fully isn't exactly a recipe for success. None of the movies, specials, or even the manga itself are produced in isolation. They all build off of and react to one another, something that is abundantly clear in how Karakuri Castle does its best to be as unlike the 6th movie as possible. I can talk bad about the movie all I want, and trust me, I will, but to understand what really makes this movie what it is, we're gonna have to take a look at the actual material it provides us. The Giant Mechanical Soldier of Karakuri Castle opens not with a giant mechanical soldier, nor with a castle. In fact, its opening is actually kind of similar to the opening of the Sky Island saga, just minus a massive shipwreck falling from the sky and plus one raging storm. This is also very quickly abandoned as the Straw Hats manage to abscond with a single treasure chest, inside of which is an old lady. But not just any old lady. An old lady that Luffy is ready to murder until she promises the treasure of her home island, a golden crown, to the Straw Hats should they return her there. Luckily, she has the only method of navigating to the island, a turtle pose. This is the moment I understood that what we have in our hands is not another Baron Omatsuri or another dead-end adventure even. This is another cursed holy sword. The lack of build-up for a new concept is once again rearing its ugly turtle-shaped head, and I'm powerless to do anything but watch in horror as it unfolds. You could argue that the turtle pose is pulling similar weight to the leaf sprouts from Omatsuri, but I would point out in return that the turtle pose has direct attention to pull to how unusual and weird it is, whereas the leaf sprouts were left for the audience to interpret how they played into the larger mystery. The turtle pose is directly telling you something weird is happening and it involves turtles, instead of letting you figure it out for yourself. The Straw Hats follow the turtle pose to Mecha Island, who instantly activate their defenses and rescue the old lady who they presume is a hostage being held by pirates. The Mary is also severely damaged by faulty inventions, which leaves the Straw Hats stranded. Still in desire of the treasure they were promised, they park in a secluded area and attempt to solve a riddle they overheard in the form of a folk song while they were approaching. Luffy solves the riddle by sheer accident. Twice. This gets the Straw Hats invited to the castle of the island's regent and the man who makes all the massive mechanical inventions, Ratchet. A small detail I actually really enjoy about this movie is that Ratchet styles a lot of his inventions like toys, at least here early on. While the meta reason for it was that this movie is made for children, the in-universe reason actually gives a little depth to the movie. Ratchet's father died when he was young, so building the design philosophy of his inventions around childhood objects is a very fun piece of characterization for him, until they completely drop that aspect and have humanoid-made robots and a heavy industrial style instead. I suppose that if we look at it from a different angle, the toy to industrial style transition can also be interpreted as Ratchet dropping the facade of innocence that he puts forward to the Straw Hats and to the residents of Mecha Island, but we'll explore more of that when we get to it. The Straw Hats agree to team up with Ratchet to solve the next part of the riddle and venture forward into the cavern that Luffy accidentally uncovered earlier. The big group comes across a trap that looks straight out of those god-awful Resident Evil movies, and Luffy forces them to charge in head first, thought second. This leads them to a pond surrounded by statues of various animals and a wall with the next part of the riddle. Robin deciphers it and says the pond needs to be drunk. Luffy and Chopper immediately drink as much as they can of that rank standing water. Think of the bacteria, Luffy! There is actually one specific animal statue, and Luffy accidentally knocks it over. The big drinking bird, and you'll never guess what it does. With the water drained, there's an open path at the bottom of the pond, but also the second half of the riddle involves striking a green forest with lightning. Luffy gets stuck and proceeds to send Sanji with Robin and Chopper when they go to check out the new pathway. The process of freeing Luffy unveils a green spear, causing Nami to groan because of a pun that works much better in Japanese. Striking the spear with lightning wakes up the island right as Robin and Chopper both realize what it really is. By the way, this whole movie is filled with just an incredible amount of Japanese puns and wordplay. The solution to every stage of the riddle is actually a play on words in Japanese, and even the name Mecha Island is a word scramble, because in Japanese, mecha spelled backwards is turtle. Turns out Ratchet knew there was no treasure and wanted to wake up the turtle so he could use it as a tool of world domination, somehow. I'm still not quite clear on the details other than it being big. To accomplish this, he returns to his castle and deploys a massive mechanical tendrils to the turtle's limbs. The Straw Hats obviously don't like that and go to stop him, getting trapped almost immediately upon entering his control center castle. This leads to an unearned emotional beat with Ratchet's mom, the old lady from the start of the film, and then the Straw Hats get started saving the day. This is where the movie's fight scenes get shoved in, but it's done absolutely atrociously. Instead of letting one fight play out then moving to the next, or even intercutting the fights in a reasonable manner, things get intercut kind of wackily. Now, intercutting isn't inherently bad. The actual series does a lot of it. It's the easiest way to show all the characters undertaking their action moments without ignoring the others. But whereas the anime and manga do it to avoid going multiple episodes without showing specific characters progressing, a movie with a much less ambiguous runtime doesn't have that issue to deal with, and the end result is that Karakuri Castle leaves out important developments in the action to have snappier cuts back and forth. Sanji and Zoro of course win their fights. Zoro's fight is a little more interesting to me because it takes place on a roller coaster, but Sanji's fight leads him and Robin to the castle's control room, where they proceed to just destroy everything in sight in a vain attempt to get the tendrils to withdraw. The main action of Luffy vs. Ratchet involves the former destroying the latter's mech suit, then his next mech suit, then his third mech suit doesn't have the right extension cord, Ratchet eventually tries to crush Luffy, accidentally activating a power-up. Ratchet is defeated, but the tendrils are still steering the turtle, aiming directly at a nearby island with a collision course. With no other resort, the Straw Hats all work together to get Luffy spinning as fast as possible so he can buzzsaw straight through the castle. The day is saved, the turtle lays some eggs, and they hatch, leaving behind the real treasure of the island, a giant eggshell made of pure gold. The Straw Hats hitch half a shell to the Mary and set sail for Water 7, and everyone lives happily ever after, save for the fact that the shell sinks halfway there. I'm just gonna let it rip. This movie is on the same tier as Chopper's Kingdom and Cursed Holy Sword. It utterly lacks the depth of a movie like Baron Matsuri while also missing the key factors that made a movie like Dead End Adventure so fun, finding itself in an awkward space where any significantly interesting ideas are either tossed aside or only brought to light in the last 20 minutes of the movie, which is also conveniently when the premise of the treasure hunt is completely abandoned. Imagine if in Indiana Jones, after the Nazis opened the Ark of the Covenant, that the next half hour was spent trying to put the lid back on instead of them all just immediately melting, and that the way to get to the Ark in the first place was a bunch of puns. The whole angle of the answer to the riddle is a bunch of Japanese language puns is incredibly dissatisfying to me as an international viewer. Now, that's not saying a lot because this is a movie made for an audience in a completely different time, completely different place, in a completely different language who happen to love puns as a culture. So really, this is just me complaining for the sake of complaining. To be fair, One Piece already was globally distributed by 2006, even if it was thanks to 4Kids. I can only imagine the horror that would spawn if they try to dub this movie too. Speaking of 4Kids, Karakuri Castle was almost certainly made with that age demographic in mind. Baron Matsuri wasn't received well by younger audiences who drove merchandise sales more prominently in that era, so they swung too hard into making sure children wouldn't be alienated by leaning into the aforementioned pun riddles and keeping the tone of the movie incredibly light, even in its most tense moments. Which is also kind of funny because the amount of adult fan service in Karakuri Castle is off the charts. Every time Nami so much as breathes, her boobs act like two colliding Gmod physics props, and when the Straw Hats meet Ratchet for dinner, her and Robin wear outfits I don't think I'm allowed to show in full on YouTube. That said, Nami's outfit when they enter the cave is designed to look like Lara Croft, which is a piece of fan service I think is properly implemented given the whole overarching adventure and treasure hunting theme. Treasure hunting films usually have pretty simple messages. Raiders of the Lost Ark's message is don't play God. The Goonies is about the power of friendship and how country clubs are evil. The theme of Lara Croft Tomb Raider is that Angelina Jolie is attractive. With that in mind, what do you think the creative team between Karakuri Castle is trying to say? This isn't rhetorical. Pause the video and don't hit play again until you've typed up at least one sentence in the comments. I'll wait. Also subscribe while you're down there. Personally, I think the theme of the movie is about respecting nature. The big bad of the film literally wants to use evil mechanical tendrils to force a living creature to bend to his will, and the ultimate treasure of the movie can only be attained by ensuring nature takes its course. The people of Mecha Island have lived in harmony with the turtle for over 1,000 years before Ratchet took over. The duty to awaken the turtle was passed along the men in his family all the way up to him, even if his father did die young and before he could impart the full duty. Ratchet does, in that regard, fit well into the theme of respecting nature. Like a halfway decent villain, his goal stands opposite of the theme. Gone are the days of living peacefully on the turtle's back. It's time to strap tendrils to that son of a gun and steer her directly to the nearest landmass, because that'll take over the world somehow. The raised stakes of a worldwide threat, plus the nature versus industry elements, put Karakuri Castle about on par with your average Captain Planet episode, only with a lot more cleavage, unless there's something going on in Captain Planet that I don't know about. And that is, at least in my opinion, what makes the giant mechanical soldier of Karakuri Castle such a disappointing movie compared to its predecessors. Baron Matsuri and the Secret Island was rife with depth and subtext that you could spend a dozen hours picking at and just barely scratch the surface. And the villain of the movie oozed charm and menace in spades. Let's look at one scene from each movie that both fit more or less the same purpose. In Baron Omatsuri and the Sacred Island, Omatsuri puts up a facade of niceness that he uses to lure pirates into his deadly trap. From the moment he's introduced, there's no question that he's the villain, but he keeps up the facade of hospitality right until the final ordeal of hell. There are dozens of hints towards his true nature the entire time he's around, but when he does the grand reveal of his plan, it's very personal. The Straw Hats have all been swallowed by the Lily Carnation and only one remains. It's a very personal and serious moment with bold use of negative space in the visuals to emphasize the tension and hopelessness of the situation. In the giant mechanical soldier of Karakuri Castle, Ratchet reveals his evil plan using a megaphone. It's interrupted multiple times by the Straw Hats, who express shock not at his plan, but at the large turtle, with them seeing Ratchet as nothing more than a joke. And the Straw Hats who aren't present all have to get their turn to exclaim surprise at the giant island being alive. The art of the scene isn't given any special emphasis, leaving exposition and humor to take precedence over all else. It's a scene painted to tell the audience everything after spending the whole movie telling the audience everything. The contrast between movie 6 and movie 7 points to a production driven by maximizing appeal at the contrast of artistic expression, a decision to put the audiences most willing to purchase cheap merchandise as the first and only priority, and by that I mean children and horny people. I'm not really a big fan of this movie, so let's just end with a bunch of random observations in the form of a numbered list. 1. I can count the amount of jokes I laughed at with one slightly mutated hand. I kept a tally on my watch through. I laughed 6 times. Here's a description of each joke and roughly how far they are into the movie. 2. There is a stunning lack of giant mechanical soldiers. There's a pretty big mechanical castle, a giant non-mechanical turtle, several huge at best mechanical suits, a trove of pretty big mechanical archers, and an army of regular-sized mechanical maids, but no giant mechanical soldier. 3. Chopper sounds different in this one. If you watch Karakuri Castle, you'll notice that Chopper doesn't sound the same as he usually does. That's because his normal VA, Ikue Otani, was on maternity leave during this period of One Piece production, meaning that Chopper's interim VA, Kazue Ikua, voiced him this time around. This is easiest to notice with the different voices for his different forms. Kazue Ikura gives him a noticeably wider range of differences. 4. The character designs are certainly something. I already lightly touched on Robin and Nami's new threads, but just take a look at Ratchet. His overall straps have nipple windows, and his glasses have windshield wipers. Aside from that, none of the Straw Hats are really given anything special for their new outfits, breaking a trend that's been around since the second movie. 5. Luffy's powered up form. This movie came out during the middle of the Water 7 saga before Enies Lobby had been animated, which means that this is the first animated version of Luffy's special transformation. The movie also takes place prior to Water 7, meaning that this movie would serve as an explanation for how he developed said technique. If I had a nickel for every time a Toei movie for a popular anime used an upcoming special form that had debuted in a manga but hadn't aired on TV yet, I would have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. 6. The turtle itself. The giant turtle is rendered in 3D animation, which works well when combined with its limited amount of screen time to give it an otherworldly vibe. It doesn't quite fit in with the film's world, giving it an aura of mystery that doesn't get or need explained. One of the few things the movie decides is worth showing instead of boasting. 7. The parody angle. After watching this movie twice and writing this whole review, I decided to look around at what other people had to say and found a somewhat popular idea that the movie was poking fun at the first 5 One Piece movies by taking their tropes and turning them on their heads. The villain makes dumb decisions and has a nonsensical goal, so nobody takes him seriously. The side characters that are normally shoehorned in as pseudo-protagonists are barely present in the movie, and multiple moments that could be played straight are played for laughs instead. I fully understand where this reading of the movie is coming from. It even builds off the same "none of these movies were produced in isolation" idea that I put forward earlier, but I personally disagree with it. The parody angle and my "it's made for small children" angle both take the same approach of analyzing the film as a piece of media reacting to its predecessors, but differ in how clever we think the creative team behind it was. Or I should say, how unrestrained the creative team behind it was. See, as much as I like Baron Omatsuri and the Secret Island, in addition to the reaction from younger audiences, the movie just didn't make as much money as the others. Films 1 through 3 were released as double features, so we can't accurately say how much they contributed to their box office, but movies 4 and 5 have their own data. Dead End Adventure grossed nearly $15 million, and Cursed Holy Sword came in at almost $13.5 million. Baron Omatsuri came in at just under $10.5 million. Imagine this. You're a Toei executive. You see the bold experimental One Piece movie that you greenlit made less money than the previous 2 that were rather risk-free. Do you greenlight another bold piece of storytelling that pushes the series' boundaries, or do you tell people working on the next one to make it as family-friendly and by the numbers as it can get? The creatives on the movie may have still grumbled and said, "I'll show you by the numbers." But if they did, it really reads as too genuine and not exaggerated enough to come across as parody or satire. Yeah, the tropes are there, and yeah, they play around with them a little bit, but not to a huge extent. Foolish villains have always been treated like fools until they cause harm. Side characters have always been unearnedly dramatic, and there's always been serious moments sidelined for laughs. Just because these moments are present doesn't make them self-aware, it just makes the movie worse. Look, I've made it clear, I don't enjoy this movie. It might be because it doesn't stack up to what came before, or it might be because it just isn't good. That's something that you're gonna have to determine for yourself by watching it on your own. My opinions are fairly meaningless, and it's perfectly fine if you think I'm a massive idiot for disagreeing with you. But I think that's all I have to say about the giant mechanical soldier of Karakuri Castle. I'd like to extend a special thank you to everyone subscribed to my Patreon page. Thanks to you all, I can pretend that making these videos is a job when people ask what I do. If you like this video and you want to see more, you can watch my other One Piece movie reviews here in this playlist, or you can see all of my One Piece videos bundled together right in one place here. Thank you for watching, and I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe so you can stick around for the next One Piece movie I cover, Episode of Alabasta, The Desert Princess, and the Pirates. That's a longer title than it should be.